Have any of you ever been trained on how to do this? How to incorporate your personal logic model into your organization's logic model, your personal values within your organizational values. Have any of you received capacity training on this? We're asked to kind of sometimes set these apart. And some of us have the pleasure of having them be more like shared missions, and that's probably the best way to go. But sometimes we struggle. But why is conocimiento with Latino families so important? Why have I given it such emphasis? Because it serves as the basis of interaction. My wife is a psychologist. She's a professor. She trains counselors that are going to go in the field. And when we would talk about this around the dinner table, she would say, you know, Hector, that actually crosses all kinds of professional boundaries in the mental health profession. You know, a person can share too much and it can become countertransference and all these things. And I'd say, all well and good. But that's not what I mean. I don't mean that when you sit with a client or when you sit with people that you're working with, then they share their pains and their burdens, and you go, well, you know what? That's nothing. Let me tell you about mine. That's not what I refer to. What I'm referring to is they know when I work in the community, they know that I'm a husband. They know that I'm a son. They know that I'm a father. They know all of these things about me before our lives intersect. And if I believe that none of that matters to this family when I come to them, then I'm sorely mistaken. Because they have watched me, and oftentimes the mothers will say, oh, yo los he visto allá, yo conozco a su esposa, you know, I have seen you there. I know who you are, I have seen you with your wife. And that kind of conocimiento that precedes the interaction is really, really valuable. It helps you build bridges with parents because they see you potentially as that parent. You also need to know that it gives them the perspective of knowing where you come from. I share all those things about who I am and my parents and whatnot so that you get a sense of Hector is not just the person that's standing in front of you today. You are not the person that's delivering the service. You are more than that. And the sooner you recognize that for the Latino community, the more profound your engagement will be. There are 4 things that working with Latino communities and families are very, very important. And conocimiento is kind of, for me, the foundation. It is personalismo, that one-on-one interaction. They know who you are and they know what you do. Okay. You also know who they are and you know how to work to help them meet their needs. You may be working in the field of reproductive health, but you must also recognize that sometimes families and individuals need more than just information on reproductive health. So having people that extend services to these families and these individuals is very, very important. And making a referral to an office for Latinos can seem impersonal. Making a referral to a specific person in that organization is oftentimes a really important aspect of the referral that motivates people to go, I'm not going to the Office of Maternal Child Health. I'm going to see so-and-so. And these are very important. I think it's true for a lot more than just Latinos, but today we're speaking about Latinos. I think the referrals that I follow up on normally are the ones when they're based on an individual, not just an organization. Respeto. Respeto translates directly as respect, but that's not what I'm talking about. Respect in the Euro-American dynamic is something that, you know, amongst youth, you can demand instantly. You know, that's youth culture sometimes that's done. But I'm talking about the old type of respect, the one that our grandparents often had, that was earned over time. So when I was raised in my family, I had to be deferential and respectful to not only my parents, but older adults that surrounded the family, and especially the elders. I found it very, very unfair that, you know, I had to be respectful to others, and yet, you know, sometimes that respect wasn't reciprocated because I was a child or a young person. What I didn't have at that moment in time was the perspective that if you do that well, then sometimes it comes around in a very favorable way with you. And so then you start being treated with respect and deference. And then you recognize that incredible value that is transmitted. Familismo, we're all interconnected. You know, the community perspective of reproductive justice that says that It's not just the individual. Well, oftentimes it's not just me. I don't make a decision without recognizing the impact that it has, first with Lucy in our partnership, and then with my family, and then my extended family. That's the way my mindset is. So if you're trying to promote or get me to do something, you might get me to listen based on my personal self-interest, but if it doesn't pass the test, the litmus test of it being good for my family, then you're probably not going to get me to do what you want. That is the way familismo is, and we're not just talking about blood relations. It's not just my family goes beyond me. It goes beyond associations. I have friends and colleagues that say, I had so many uncles, so many tias, so many tios, and so many cousins, and it wasn't until I was adult that I realized that we weren't actually related. That is the richness of how we create our family's dynamic. And so when you're working with immigrant families who are maybe not with a large number of real biological families, we create those kinds of families. We want that feeling of connectedness with others. And so these are the things that happen. Now, the other part is that humildad, is that I may have a capacity to share information, but I also have a capacity to share what I don't know. My authority only goes so far. And when you work with the Latino community, sometimes saying that you don't know is an important thing just to cop to. They know that you know something, but knowing where the limit of that is, because incredibly, that is not something that we're taught to do a great deal of. See, my education, my professional experience, it teaches me that I should stand up here and command your presence and make you believe everything that I know. When you work with the Latino community, sometimes walking in with a humble heart and maybe attempting to learn from what their perspective and what they know is very, very valuable. Now, I'm going to ask, how many of us ever were, while in college or any other educational setting, learned those four concepts of personalismo, respeto, familismo, y humildad? Oh, come on, I'm sure you learned them in college? Where did you go to college? Wow, I'm impressed. That's the first time I've ever heard anybody say that. In the field of mental health services and counseling, sometimes they address it. So I learned these not in a university, not by a professor, but from my family. So when you work with families, know that there is oftentimes this undercurrent of secondary education that's going on. To ser bien educado, that is to be well educated in the Latino culture, oftentimes has little to do with formal credentials and education. It has to do with how you interact with other people. When people will say to my mother, sus hijos parecen ser bien educados, o yo observé que su hijo está bien educado. Your children appear to be well educated. I've observed your children behave in a well-educated way. It's the biggest honor that my parents could ever get. Had nothing to do with our credentials in our professional service. It meant that we knew how to sit in a space with other people in a respectful, humble way and know how to interact with other people so that we weren't taking anything from them and letting their dignity stay in place. I hear a little bit less, that Latinos and teen pregnancy, it's not a big issue, because they would observe certain things that would send that the observer from the outside would get the wrong message. They would say, well, I see that when this young woman has a child, I see the family, coalesce around her. I see there be celebrations around either baptisms or other welcoming ceremonies, and the grandparents seem to be elated. And in my experience, I never met the parent of a teenager who was ecstatic that she got pregnant too early. They recognize that things have changed, and I would say to you, don't confuse the excitement of welcoming a child with saying that these families actually expected this from their daughters.